Welcome to the selfgrowth.com show. My name is David Riklan, and I'm the founder of selfgrowth.com. Today, we'll be discussing thriving, not surviving, how to get happy, stay happy, and spread happiness. To help us understand this topic, I'm excited to interview Gina Gardiner. Make sure to listen closely. We're going to be sharing a lot of information today. But before we get started, I just want to take a couple of minutes and share some information about Gina. Gina Gardiner, she's a #1 international best-selling author, motivational coach, empowerment, relationship, and strategic business coach with over 30 years experience, helping people literally transform their lives by recognizing their true worth, helping them feel more confident so they can achieve a life of true fulfillment. I love that concept. Gina ran an award-winning school for 20 years, mostly from a wheelchair. I want to talk about that a little bit later. The gift of her disability was a unique approach to leadership and empowerment. Her latest #1 best-selling book, Thriving, Not Surviving, offers the insights, principles, and strategies which underpin that success. She's the founder of the Thrive Together Tribe membership group and creator of the Thriving, Not Surviving transformational personal and spiritual development program and the Enlightened Leadership program and the 7-Day Happiness Challenge. We'll also get into in a little bit. Gina's on a mission to positively impact the lives of 1 million people in the next 5 years, helping them step into being their authentic selves, to recognize and own the genuine power buried within to become spiritual matriarchs and patriarchs, to have the power to really change, feel self-confident, find their purpose, and achieve true fulfillment, and to help others do the same. So we've got a lot to discuss today. Gina, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really thrilled to be here.
All right, we have a lot of information I want to cover today, so let's jump right in.
Okay.
Let's start with your book. You had the #1 best-selling book, Thriving, Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success, and Fulfillment. What was the motivation behind writing this book?
I'd already written a number of books, and in the period of time between writing the previous book, Chariots on Fire, which is a bit of my story and the principles by which I live, my thinking had moved on. By this time, I'd worked with many, many more clients, and it felt right to me to actually expand the original thinking to where I was in that place some 4 or 5 years later, because inevitably things move on. And what I'd noticed is it didn't matter whether my client was an individual coming for life coaching, or they were a couple coming to work on their relationship, or it was strategic business coaching, that whatever the clients came with, that ultimately we touched the 5 pathways. And the pathways are that of belief. Because if you believe in yourself, then you've got half a chance. And if you think, let me give you an example. Roger Bannister, the 4-minute miler, he was the first guy to run the 4-minute mile. He was told by the medics of the time, if you run that fast, you will die. Not you might, they were absolutely convinced that you wouldn't be able to take enough oxygen and that you die. So if you look at the footage of that, there are people in white coats with oxygen bottles ready to rescue him, or at least attempt to. That he ran knowing the risk, I think, is amazing. But what I find even more interesting is within a month, 30 other people had run a 4-minute mile. Why? Because they believed it to be possible. So if you believe that you can't do something, then it's a done deal. If you believe you can, you don't necessarily have to know how, you just have to have that belief in yourself. Beliefs was first pathway. The second is that of relationships. And every relationship that we have with other people is a reflection of the relationship we have with ourselves. So if you've got a great relationship with yourself, the chances are you're going to have good relationships with other people. But if you don't like yourself, if you don't believe you deserve being treated well, then you will let other people treat you badly. So relationships, whether they're personal or professional, all start with you. The third pathway was that around success. And in my experience, and I've worked with thousands of people, people fall into 2 categories, generally speaking. Those who fear failure and those who fear success.
Interesting. Okay.
And both of them are as limiting as the other. And there's lots of people who will self-sabotage. They're doing well, and then they will sabotage it so that they don't continue to do well. Or they'll take the route that I won't try, because if I don't try, I've not failed.
Right.
And for me, the whole how we approach success, do we know what our success criteria are? What does it look like? Because if you don't know what you're aiming for, you're never going to know when you've got there. And what we as humans tend to do is we tend to keep moving the goalposts. So we're never satisfied because we've not given ourselves the opportunity to be. The fourth is that of managing change and transition. Now, I find it interesting that there are three constants in life: death, taxes, and change. And yet we are fearful of change, and many people struggle with even the smallest change. And it was looking at how can you help people feel resilient and confident when changes need to happen. Because if you think about it, from the moment we are conceived until we die, we are in a constant position of changing, aren't we?
Sure.
Physically, emotionally, our life circumstances change. But I believe we're hot-wired to fear change, because as cavemen and women, and we like to think we're very evolved, but I don't think we're perhaps quite as evolved as we thought we were, change meant threat. You know, if there's a change in the environment, or somebody new came into the clan, that was a potential threat. And so learning to embrace change, not for change's sake, but actually embrace the fact that by changing that we can develop and grow, that's a really important pathway for me. And then the final one was that of purpose and fulfillment. And for many people, they get the trappings of success and then think, is this it? You know, why is it that I've got all of this stuff, but I don't feel fulfilled? And so for me, it was to really move the agenda forward, to help people recognize that if you deal with one of these things and you don't deal with it in the round, then another bit of your life tends to fall apart. And, you know, I've been over the years quite criticized because I haven't gone for just one element of life. Because for me, it's a holistic thing that you need to look at your relationships, you need to look at your work, you need to look at how much fun you have, you know, and the whole thing needs to be seen as a whole and not those separate bits of our life.
That makes a lot of sense. And each one of those areas that you talk about, I think, are critical. You know, whether it's beliefs, obviously, are critical as a starting point. Relationships are critical. Your overall success is critical. Change is also something I know a lot of people have difficulty dealing with. Yeah.
Yes.
And change is something I feel you need to embrace because it's a positive. And then I really find it interesting, this concept of fulfillment, because I see that different as kind of achievement or success.
Yes.
You know, I almost look at achievement or success, something that you can manage in this step-by-step approach. And all right, if you want to get here, these are the steps to take it. But then fulfillment is the concept of actually being satisfied that you've done all these pieces to get success. So these are all very, very important, all five of these areas. I like the fact that you're focusing on them. And I just want to take 1 minute right now. And one of the things that Gina's created that she's going to offer folks, and I'm going to give everybody a link to go to right now, is something called the 7-Day Happiness Challenge. And Gina, you're giving this away to everybody who wants to go for free, right? There's no cost associated with this?
There's 7 videos, 1 a day, and they're absolutely free. If people want to have it in book form, they can buy it, but you don't have to. You can have the 7-day challenge for free, because I'm just very aware of how many people are unhappy. And actually, my belief is happiness is a choice. That even when difficult things happen in your life, you don't have to be happy about those, but you could still find things in your life to be very happy and contented.
Sure. Yep. So let me give out a URL first, and we're going to give one through selfgrowth.com. Very simple. So you just need to go to our website, selfgrowth.com/thrive, because Gina wants to help everybody thrive. So selfgrowth.com/thrive, and it will immediately forward information to get free access to the 7-day challenge. But I want to jump into a lot of other things today also. So obviously you've been through a lot. I mentioned some of the things, wheelchair, some of the things. So what's been your biggest hurdle that you've had to overcome in your life? So let's step us through that. What's been the biggest hurdle, and kind of what's been the impact of that?
I had a serious ski accident in 1982 when I fell about 150, 200 feet down a mountain. And I was the deputy principal, and I became the principal a few months later because my principal suddenly died overnight. And I was determined that I wanted the school to be a success for the pupils and for the staff. But over the years, had a whole range of things happen, 2 failed back surgery. And so for the most part, I ran my school from a wheelchair. Now, in many ways, that wasn't the greatest hurdle, although I have to say there were dark times and
Sure.
significant challenges came out of that. But the biggest hurdle really was finding a way to make things work. So, for example, I couldn't physically get into my classrooms because
Right.
even if I got my wheelchair through the door, I couldn't physically get round the classrooms because there simply wasn't room. And I'd been appointed as the deputy principal to be the catalyst for change. I was the youngest faculty on the staff, and the school was stuck in very old ways of doing things.
Right.
And so I had to find a way of empowering people to take responsibility for their own performance and the performance of others without me standing behind them saying, that's right and that's not good enough. I had to find a way of creating a language that everybody on the staff and the children and the parents understood, where when we used words like excellent and used words like engaging and taking responsibility, that everybody had a real understanding of what that meant in the context of the school. And it was incredibly successful. We were one of the first beacon schools. We were on the best 100 schools in England. The inspectorate do a list, and we were on that list twice during my tenure, which is very, very unusual. And for me, it was necessity was the mother of invention. I'd like to think I would have still come up with the same way of doing things. But I'm honest enough to know that actually I'd probably be far too interfering, that circumstances created a perfect storm, if you like. And the only way for me to make sure that every child had the very best education that we could give them, and the staff too, that they saw it as a learning opportunity, was to create what ended up being a very structured sequential approach. It didn't start like that. Each time there was a problem, I had to find a solution. And over time, it became a cohesive approach. But it was a bit like, serendipitous in the first instance. But the gift of that is I've now used that with countless individuals, businesses, and it works. That those approaches are very easy for people to incorporate into their daily life, because they're not the sort of thing where you have to have a complicated piece of paper. They're simple activities consistently done. And for me, one of the things that I'd like, the people who are listening to this, just to recognize that 95% of what we do is habitual. All right? We don't think about it. It doesn't go past our conscious minds at all. And unless you question that, your response to everything in life is going to be your habitual response. Your language will be habitual. Your behaviors will be habitual. And what I think that the gift of the disability did for me is it made me recognize that if I was going to stay stuck in that habitual way of behaving and thinking, I was going to fail and the school would fail as a result. And for me, that was not an option. And so I was, in a sense, faced with a really stark choice to take total responsibility for myself and how I operated, and enable other people within the school to do the same. Because the interesting thing is how many of us hand our power over to someone else. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, he made me unhappy, or
Right.
she made me angry? But what you're doing is you're handing over the power over your emotions and your way of being to somebody else. And so part of this was about helping individuals, and then as a team, and then as a school, people take total responsibility for everything they said, how and when they said it, or whether they said it at all, every action, how those actions were undertaken, and getting people to recognize that when you do that, magic happens, because you're not thinking in a habitual way. You're not triggering habitual behaviors from other people. So if I may, I'd like to give you an example of that in a personal setting. How often, as listeners, have you had somebody say something to you and it's really got to you, it's irritated you? But when you actually analyze what they've said, it's not the words, it's their body language, or it's their tonality that's triggered you into thinking of, well, there was a teacher who was nasty to me, or my father was overcritical. Then the problem is that you get tipped into habitual behaviors and you snap back, which puts them into a habitual behavior where they shout at you, and before you know where you are, you've got a row. If you're in non-habitual behaviors, conscious thinking, when somebody says something to you, you're in a position where you can say, what do they really mean? What am I hearing? Am I hearing what they actually are saying, or do I need to clarify that? And it gives you the opportunity to do something in a different way. Now, with all of the work that I do with people, it's about giving them some very simple constructs, some simple strategies to help them get into conscious thinking and behaviors, and give them the choice, because everything we do is a choice. Even not choosing is a choice, and every choice has consequences. And in my experience, it's often when we don't actively choose that the consequences are most far-reaching.
All right, you just put a lot of material out there. You put a lot of things out there. So I want to delve a little bit deeper into some of them. So the first thing you're really starting with is, change was, you needed to make changes. You needed to make changes both in the organization, at the school, for yourself. And you reminded me, and I think this is very true for a lot of us, that we're almost on autopilot with a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Where we have these habits, and we think of autopilot, when you're driving. Sometimes when you're driving, I can completely forget I'm driving, and I end up at my location.
And you don't know how you got there.
I'm like, how did I get here? I have no memory of the actual drive. But unfortunately, in life, a lot of our life is lived on this autopilot, where, as you mentioned, it's kind of we're habit. And it's not only in terms of driving, but it's how we react and interact with people.
Absolutely.
It's like somebody says something, it's an automatic trigger to us doing something, and then you trigger their trigger, and it spirals, but it's all automatic. So I really love this concept of what I think the term you used was kind of conscious awareness.
Yes.
Or conscious awareness. And you said there's a lot of things that you talk about relative to that and you teach. Can you give us kind of one example of something that people could potentially apply? Because I think people get this, and we've talked about this concept of kind of the power of now and living now. So can you give us kind of one example of something that you would recommend people do to enable that?
Well, I think collect gratitudes. So collecting gratitudes in the way in which I talk about it is that you go through each day looking out for those things that give you pleasure, make you smile, that you recognize that actually you're fortunate, because we're living in the Western world. I mean, for the most part, we've got enough to eat, we've got decent plumbing, we're not cold, and so on. Right. So they're things to be grateful for. So during my day, for me, the natural world is a huge source of gratitude. So right. I love watching the sky and a beautiful plant. But it can be that you're having a nice cup of tea, or a friend phones you. little things that during the day, a meal that you've enjoyed, or the fact that your seat's comfortable, or that you've got clean clothes to put on, make it easy.
Right.
But in order to do that, you have to be A, consciously thinking, and B, in the moment. As you go through the day, then notice those. And at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, scan the day and choose five.
Hmm.
My five gratitudes for today are going to be. So that sets your nighttime on a positive note.
Right.
You're recalibrating the brain to be positive, but you cannot collect gratitudes if you are not actually in this moment.
That makes
Remember,
sense.
you can't change the past, it's gone. You can only learn from it.
Hmm.
And don't know if the future is actually going to happen.
Right.
All we've got is this moment.
Yeah.
I had a younger brother. I loved him to bits. He went out for a cycle ride. It was the last practice for the London to Brighton cycle ride. As far as we knew, very, very fit, regularly cycled 40, 50 miles. He just dropped dead. 49. And
That's brutal.
even in that, there's a gift. And the gift of that for me was treasure every day.
Right.
Because none of us know what's going to happen, do we?
Hmm.
And although
No.
that's a very extreme example, it seems a shame to waste each day worrying about what's happened and being anxious about what might never happen,
Hmm.
rather than living in the moment. And I think collecting gratitudes is so powerful to help you change that.
And there's a couple of things I like about what you're saying there. So I'm a big believer in gratitude, but I like the idea of really kind of also giving yourself a goal. You're going to do 5
Yeah.
during the day. So it forces you to continue to do this during the day. And I like the idea of reviewing them at night. And I think that's important also, and very important, because it lets you kind of review the positive things of the day. It leaves you an opportunity to actually leave the day peacefully,
Yeah.
because you're focused on that.
I
And
just,
that's important, because a lot of people go to bed stressed. I know frequently you get all the stuff on your mind, you're very stressed about it. So that's I like the concept of how you approach it.
I would just clarify that during the day you collect as many gratitudes as you notice, and then you
Okay.
just
Yep.
respond.
Okay.
Because the more you are doing that, the more you are actually being in the moment.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. I like it. So we're talking about happiness. And one of the questions I want to talk about is, why is it so difficult for so many people to really achieve and maintain happiness? So
I
many
think,
people, roller coasters. What's your thoughts on that?
I think we make it difficult. I call it the I'll be happy when, and if people do the challenge, they would go into more detail. But, I'll be happy when I've got the big house. I'll be happy when I've got the perfect job. I'll be happy when I've got the perfect partner who never nags me, when my children tidy their room, and so it'll be when this and this and this and this and this happens, then I'll be happy. But
Right.
of course, it's always in the future.
Hmm.
And if you add to that, as soon as you've attained those goals, what we tend to do is add more.
Right.
And so people think of happiness as being this big, unobtainable thing at the end of the rainbow, like a pot of gold, rather than I can choose to be content and happy. And I can choose to do that even when life is tough. Because even when life is tough, there are things that you can be happy about. It doesn't mean that because one thing in your life is going badly, that you can't choose to be happy in other ways. So instead of the I'll be happy when, rather, I choose to be happy every time I see the sunshine. I choose to be happy every time I see the rain watering the plants and giving them the sucker they need. I'll be happy every time I have a cup of tea. I'll be happy every time I have a hot shower, and so on. So it's every time rather than and. And it's a frame of mind. It's a new habit, if you like.
Right.
And when you establish the habit of looking for opportunities to be happy, happiness is much easier to achieve and sustain.
So one of the things that jumped out at me as you were talking is this concept of you need to consciously make happiness a habit.
Yeah.
It needs to be part of who you are and what you're doing. And just to reiterate for folks, I'm going to give out the website one more time for folks if you haven't had a chance yet for the 7-Day Happiness Challenge, selfgrowth.com/thrive. Very simple. You'll find all the details there, selfgrowth.com/thrive. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with you is what do you say to people? And I know people sometimes face what they consider insurmountable challenges. So what do you say to people who are facing these very difficult challenges in their life and they find that they're literally in overwhelm mode? They feel overwhelmed. They can't handle it. What do you do? What do you tell those people?
I'd like to separate that into two separate things, if I may.
Sure.
But let me use myself as an example. When I came out of hospital, having had the failed back surgery, if my carer hadn't come in and filled the kettle and put a mug down and put a tea bag in it, I couldn't make myself a cup of tea. I was limited to read and to watch daytime TV, and I have to say it doesn't do it for me. I could have focused on all of the things that I couldn't do and been completely overwhelmed by that. I chose to go straight back to school where I could use my brain, my hands, my mouth patently works, and I could do something that I could find the things that I could do. So for me, a big part of it is you focus on what you can do rather than what you can't.
Right.
And there are very few circumstances where there is absolutely nothing you can do, because it's not the challenge that defines you, it's what you do with the challenge. So if the challenge is insurmountable, I mean, bereavements is a good example in the fact you can't change the fact that somebody that you love has died. However, you can choose to live in that place of grief, or you can choose to, with help if necessary, work through it and find a way to live. Yeah. So for me, however overwhelming, however difficult the challenge is, I think it is about looking at, even within all of that, there'll still be some things that you can do. And if you can do nothing about it, you can change the way in which you're approaching it. The second thing about overwhelm, and people get into overwhelm. I've had a client just before this who had been in total overwhelm. Actually, there was nothing hugely bad happening in her life. She had just got into that place where life had got on top of her. Right. And if that's the case, then it is about it's almost like a big bowl of spaghetti, and you can't see where one bit of spaghetti starts and another bit ends.
Sure.
But it's about teasing it out and choosing, right, I can affect this little bit. I can't deal with that, the big, right, but I'm going to do this little bit, and breaking it down into 5 or 10 minutes of something that you can do. That gives you a sense of achievement. And then you can then move on from that to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And overwhelm can be created for a whole range of reasons. And I think part of overwhelm is recognizing that you need to take a step back, take a deep breath. And there's a good reason for taking a deep breath, because it changes your physiological state. Sure. And then looking at, okay, let's look at the whole. Let's take a step back and let's start with something small that I know I can achieve. When I've achieved that, I'll move on to the next thing and the next thing. Every journey starts with the first step. And sure, even if I was thinking about walking from here to Edinburgh, which is about 450 miles, if I took step after step, however small and however long, I'd eventually get there. And life's a bit like that. But the other thing, if you're in total overwhelm, I would urge you, get some help. If your boiler wasn't working properly, or your car wasn't working properly, and it was overwhelmed with, flooded with petrol, and waiting a bit didn't sort it, you'd go to a garage and get somebody to sort it out. And yet people are quite resistant, aren't they, when their lives are in disarray, that they are sometimes resistant in terms of asking for help. And it can help you get a great sense of perspective. If you change your perspective, you change your reality.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you said there. And just the last thing you mentioned in terms of going to get help. I think for a lot of people, they see going to get help almost as a sign of weakness.
Mhm.
And I used to be that way. And I realized that it's really a sign of strength that you're
Absolutely.
willing to admit that, hey, I need help,
Yeah.
that I can't do everything myself. And it's okay. It's okay to need help. And it's
Ev-
okay to go ask for help.
If I may, I'll share a story with you because asking for help, I was always very happy to give it, but I wasn't necessarily happy to ask for it and
Sure.
receive. And I think there's a lot of people like that. I was on a course in America, and I was working with a buddy, and one of the theme of the session was about asking for help. And I admitted that I found it difficult to ask for help. And my buddy said to me, do you like giving help? I said, yeah, I love it. I get a great sense of
Mhm.
satisfaction from helping other people. He said, well, he got very cross with me. How dare you? You like to do it. How dare you not allow people to do the same for you? So I took this to heart. The course finished and I decided to stay in America for an extra couple of days. And I decided I'd go off to the mall to buy some Christmas presents. It was December.
Mhm.
And I'd hired an electric wheelchair. And so off I toddled. And the hotel we were staying in San Diego had a long drive, quite a slope, which I
Right.
didn't notice so much on the way because it was downhill.
Mhm.
Went
Yep.
and did my shopping, came back, got a third of the way up the hill, and the electric wheelchair died. So there am I. My mobile phone doesn't work if there's no signal. I'm in the chair. I'm a third of the way up a mile-long drive. And I think, what the hell am I going to do now? A taxi comes round the corner, can see that I'm in trouble. I'm stuck in the middle of the
Sure.
driveway. He stops. His English wasn't very good. My Spanish is non-existent apart from hola. But he could see the problem. So he parked the car and valiantly started to push the electric wheelchair up the slope. A few minutes later, another taxi arrived, and there's a taxi driver and 3 passengers who all get out. The driver explains what's going on. The taxi driver parks the car, and now I've got 5 people pushing my wheelchair up the hill, each pushing.
Right.
To cut a long story short, by the time we got to the top, there were 17 people all in a row, pushing each other, pushing my chair. If ever there was a lesson in accepting help because you need it,
Right.
there we go.
I like it. And people, I'm that way. I like to help people. And
Mhm.
there's value. And I like that concept where if you like doing it, you shouldn't deprive other people of the opportunity to help you. I like that.
Yeah.
I want to switch topics to something slightly different.
Okay.
And the concept is kind of thrive, not survive. So what advice do you have to help people get to this level of thriving versus simply surviving? And I know a lot of people are in survival mode. What advice do you have for them? Thrive
I,
to survive.
I think it's a multi-layered thing. The first thing is to be aware, to recognize that life can be even better. That if you spend your time that you are anxious, depressed, stressed,
Mhm.
that you spend time being unhappy, then you have a really significant choice to make. Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
Sure.
So the first thing is awareness, but the second thing is you've got to do something differently if you want a different result. My favorite quote of all time is Einstein's definition of madness, is to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. But we all do it. We do it
Sure.
harder and longer and more frequently. So that to recognize that actually it's your choice whether you stay exactly as you are and stay stuck and
Mhm.
things are the same, or whether you're going to take the opportunity to do things differently and get a different result. Remember,
Mhm.
95% of what we do is habitual. And
Right.
so what we've got to do is to break those habitual habits which are disempowering, break those beliefs, those limiting beliefs that keep us stuck. And I think that's a really good place to start. What are the beliefs that you hold about yourself that actually limit you? I'm not good enough. I'm not rich enough. I don't have enough education. I'm too big, I'm too small, I haven't
Mhm.
got enough time. All of those beliefs keep us really stuck. I'd like to share a story because, in a sense, this really demonstrates what I mean. I went on an Anthony Robbins course after I'd become a qualified master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP.
Mhm.
And I wanted to see lots of people using NLP.
Right.
And I toggled off to the Excel Centre, which is a big exhibition centre in London. There were 10,000 people on the course, which I found quite amazing. And part of the course was to do a fire walk.
Mhm.
Now, a fire walk is where you walk in bare feet over hot coals.
Right.
And if you're in the right mindset, you can do that without being burnt. Now, at that time, it's 2006, I'd had an internal spinal stimulator fitted, but I could walk a few steps unaided, very,
Mhm.
very limited. In the morning, Tony Robbins had been talking about a course that was running in California, and I dismissed it. How would I manage that in a manual chair on my own? I did work all over the country, but I always had a taxi that took me from my house to where I was going and brought me
Right.
back.
Mhm.
And I dismissed it. So I did the fire walk with help, somebody each side, and I was absolutely chuffed. I was ecstatic that I'd managed it. Sat back in my wheelchair, and as I did, I faced the guy who was after me. He was a double amputee. He tipped himself onto his hands and he walked on those hot coals on his hands. And
Wow.
in that moment, I thought to myself, if he can do that, then where am I self-limiting? If he can do that, I can go to America and go on a course. So that night I booked my flight, I booked my ticket. I've been all over the place studying and working. And I am incredibly grateful to that guy because he taught me not to limit myself.
Right.
So the first thing I would say to people, if you want your life to be different, do a thorough audit of your beliefs about yourself, about relationships, about money, about
Mhm.
success, about life in general. If they are empowering ones, keep them. If they're not, challenge them because they'll have been installed when you were little, and
Right.
we look for evidence to
Mhm.
support that they are real, but they are no more real than well, Superman is. They are our perception,
Right.
so they
Okay.
become our reality.
Sure.
So I can give people who are listening an example which really shows this. You're in a park. There's one dog and there are two people. Okay.
Okay.
First person has had a terrible experience as a young child with a dog. They're frightened of dogs. Their belief is that all dogs are dangerous.
Sure.
The dog approaches them. They start going, oh, go away, go away. The dog gets very unsettled, starts to growl.
Mhm.
Their belief that all dogs are dangerous is confirmed.
Sure.
The dog then approaches the second person who loves dogs, has always had dogs,
Mhm.
sees the dog approach and thinks, that's just like Mickey, my dog
Right.
that I had when I was 10. The dog comes over, they go, hi boy, they know how to approach it. The dog wags its tail. Their belief that all dogs are friendly is confirmed.
Mhm.
We consistently look for evidence to support our beliefs that we can or we
Sure.
can't, we should or we shouldn't.
Mhm.
And so I would suggest to you that if you want life to be different, start with your beliefs because they are the powerhouse that generates everything else.
I like it. And that's something you mentioned, the five areas that you focus on. That's the first one. Beliefs
Absolutely.
is a critical one because it really sets expectations for everything.
I think so. And the
I
interesting thing for me, disability is a metaphor for life. How many people do you know who diss their ability, who belittle their achievements, who say, oh,
Mhm.
this old thing if they're given a compliment?
Oh,
The
constant.
difference for me is that my legs I don't walk very far. Even now, I still have to use a wheelchair, although I can walk short distances. But I just get in my electric wheelchair and I go usually at full speed and I just drive away.
Mhm.
But you take those limiting beliefs with you everywhere you go. You're the common denominator in your life, and your beliefs are what you take with you. So I would suggest it's time to challenge those beliefs if they're not empowering you.
I agree. That makes a lot of sense, a lot of sense. And I think back to beliefs that I had
Yeah.
that have led you down the wrong, and they lead you down the wrong path. They limit your ability to do things, and you almost see yourself in certain areas as a failure before you even begun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're starting out with the mindset that you're going to fail, the likelihood of success is minimal. It makes
It's
total
zero,
sense.
isn't it? I've done a
So,
lot of research on highly successful people, and many people who are not highly successful think that they are special beings. You know,
mhm,
they're almost, you know, from another planet. The defining difference is that very successful people believe they will be very successful, and they keep working at it until they are.
right.
Failure is not an option.
Sure.
And in my view, the only failure, the only true failure is that when you fail to give it a go, or you fail to learn from the experience.
Right.
I mean, do you learn better when things go right or things go wrong?
Oh, when things go wrong, you can remember it for sure. It's
And
clear in
so,
your mind. Something goes right, you're like, ah, it went right. You don't take something goes wrong, it sits with you. So I'm a big believer in looking at the things that go wrong in terms of using it as a learning opportunity.
absolutely, but we fear failure. Isn't it incredible? And
Yes.
yet, that failure, if we saw failure as a developmental tool, then I think it would be very different. But
Yeah.
people close it down. I might fail, or I failed, I can't try again. And I think that's a shame because it just closes the possibilities down.
I want to talk a little bit about something that you've put together called the Thrive Together Tribe.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about it? What motivated you to do this, and how can people find out more about it?
There's been a huge amount of research which demonstrates that if you are surrounded by like-minded, motivated people, you are more likely to remain motivated and successful. If you are surrounded by people who say to you, oh, don't do that, you might fail,
Right.
or that you know, you're getting above yourself, don't do that,
Hmm.
then that's going to keep you playing small. And I wanted to set up a safe, non-judgmental place where people could get together. There's twice a month coaching, interactive coaching, where not only could my team and myself give the people support, but members could give each other support.
Hmm.
But yes, sometimes challenge and say, do you know what? You're being a bit of a victim here. Or they could support people through difficult times, that
Hmm.
they could celebrate when things went well. Then people are more likely to actually activate and create change and to sustain it over time. And so the tribe is there to support people in creating a life that it is even better.
Hmm.
So it meets twice a month online through Zoom, and there is always a theme. Sometimes members provide the theme, sometimes I do. And there's a presentation, and then it goes into interactive coaching. There's an interactive Facebook Live, and then people within the membership have access to the structured personal and spiritual development program,
Hmm.
which is all done with videos and activities and theme journals and so on. So it all comes as part of the package.
All right. Where would people find out? We gave information on the 7-day challenge. Where would people go to find information about the Thrive Together Tribe? Should they
There's
search
find
for
that
you?
on the
Or,
website, which is genuinely-u.com, and it's the word you, so genuinely-u.com.
okay.
But if you go onto the challenge, the 7-day challenge, you should find the link to the website
Mhm.
there, and there
Okay.
is, I think, some information about the Thrive Tribe.
All right.
Um,
So genuinely-u.com.
that's right.
Plus, as mentioned earlier, I recommend people sign up, 7-day happiness challenge. You'll be able to get more information there as well. So let
Brilliant.
me jump in a couple of other things before we wrap up here. I know you have this significant mission in life, this very
Yes.
big mission and we talked a little bit about it. Tell us a little bit more. What is it and why is it so important to you?
When I was the principal of a school, and it was a big school, um, I had a real sense that my sense of purpose was very clearly defined, and my
Hmm.
purpose was to give people within that context the very best start in life that I could give the children, and that for my teachers, I wanted them to go on to grow, whether they stayed at our school or whether they moved on to other places. And then through Beacon, being a Beacon school, worked with thousands of other teachers and dozens of other schools. And so that was very well satisfied. When I then started to work for myself, and I started to work in a very different way, but with much smaller numbers, one-on-one generally, or within organizations, there was this sense that we live in very strange times, I think. I mean, before this program, we were talking about Brexit and political situation. Isn't it interesting that materially we've probably been never better off?
Right.
And yet stress, anxiety, depression are hugely on the increase. In the UK alone, £70 billion a year is lost through days lost due to stress.
That's crazy. Yep.
The cost of presenteeism, when people are in work but actually not firing on all cylinders, is thought to be twice that much. Now then think of the cost of that to those individuals and to their families. And I had this growing sense of, I had some simple technologies that can make a significant difference. So I could keep it to myself, or I could work on the principle that I needed to share these with people to help them live a more happy and satisfied life, and through them their families would be, their relationships better, their children would be better, because the research shows that children who are in happy circumstances when they grow up, and I'm not making, it doesn't have to be 2.4 children and the dog, but in happy relationships within that context of the family, do better. They do better educationally, they do better psychologically, and so on. So it just seemed to me that I've got all of this experience, 30 plus years of experience of empowering people, and all of these techniques and technologies. It became more and more important that I shared it. I think the quality of leadership throughout the Western world is in a real state at the moment. Integrity, compassion, care seems to be very short on the ground. And we've got to do something different. And the only way to start is individual by individual. And so my mission is to help people step into being the power that is theirs when they are genuinely, authentically the best version of themselves. And that power is very different. It's the power which is, if I'm standing in my power, David, then in a sense, I give you permission to shine and stand in your power.
Makes sense.
It's not about diminishing you. It is about that if we then both stand in our power, together we collectively have much more that we can achieve as a two than we can as two individuals. Just imagine if you've got 1 million people who have these technologies, who have a habit which looks at what you can achieve rather than focusing on all of the depression and the fear that's going on in the world. And so for me, that became a burning need, if you like, to share this stuff, to help individuals, help communities, help the world. So it may sound a bit not about ego at all. It is about a genuine desire to make a positive difference.
I love that mission. And I assume that's part of your kind of your long-term plans. With a lot of this is you talk about being genuine, which I like the website you picked, genuinely-you, because it makes sense. Well, long-term plans for kind of what your vision for Genuinely You.
So the Enlightened Leadership Program is just about to be launched in the next few weeks. And that's looking at leadership in a different way. It's a unique take on leadership. And it's not for the faint-hearted. It's the Iron Man or woman of leadership programs, because it works on the principle that to lead others effectively, you have to lead yourself first. And so knowing yourself, doing the work on yourself is half of the program. It's a 10-month long program. It's supported by leadership facilitators, interactive coaching, lots and lots of support all the way through. But so by the end of that people will be enlightened, conscious leaders who are able to lead absolutely by example, who will lead with integrity, who want to leave a living legacy, not wait till they're dead, because every word we use, every action leaves a legacy, doesn't it? It leaves its mark. And then the plan is that those people will become the spiritual matriarchs and patriarchs who will then take this out into their communities, their organizations, and that they will continue to become the masterminders of future developments. But that's only part of the plan for me, because I want that to fund the infrastructure for a program for young people. I'm a governor at the local sixth form college. The number of youngsters who are already on antidepressants, who are self-harming, who are struggling with thoughts of suicide, it's terrifying.
I know.
So I want a program for them, and I want a program for parents, because life has changed since you and I were kids.
Sure.
Life is so much more complicated for the youngsters of today. And I don't believe that parents are in any way resourced to deal with that. And they struggle. And because of that, their youngsters struggle too. So ultimately, I want programs for them, but I want those to be supported by the success of the leadership program. So for me, it's about creating a holistic, embracing program where whoever you are, and there's already an enormous amount of free stuff on the website that people can go and dip into. So I don't want money to be the thing that will stop people having access to help. But at the same time, the paid programs, for me, it's about utilizing that in order to provide something more far-reaching for parents.
Makes sense.
And young people.
All right. So the place to go, two places. One, your main website, genuinely-u.com, and all the information about your programs, what you're doing. And for the 7-day happiness challenge, go to selfgrowth.com/thrive, and that will take you right there. And we covered a lot of information today. I want to really thank you for sharing all this, and a lot of very specific things also for people to act on. Do you have any final words for our audience today?
I would say to you that laughter is a great antidote to stress. I think being playful, finding ways to actually enjoy life and have fun that don't have to cost you a lot of money. It's not about material stuff, but actually, watching, if you've got a pet, watching them do something to see. How many of you are parents that are watching this? When's the last time that you actually got down on the floor and you played with your kids? When was the last time that you laughed so much that your eyes ran, and you had to blow your nose? Because I do think that I take what I do very seriously, but that doesn't mean I can't be playful about it.
Right.
I think humor, if you're in a wheelchair, I have to tell you, you need a very well-developed sense of humor.
Sure.
Okay. But I would say to people, look for ways to self-care, look for ways to lighten up, and to play.
All right. That's a great message. Thanks again for sharing all the information. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Make sure to check out all the things that Gina's doing. We gave a couple of websites, and I want to wish everybody great success in all areas of your life. We'll talk to everybody soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.